A 12-year-old boy walks into a bank to deposit his birthday money. What should have been a proud moment turns humiliating, until his mother walks in and changes everything without raising her voice. Tyrese Porter wasn't the kind of kid who usually got nervous. He was quick with a joke, fast on the court, and smart enough to keep up with kids 2 grades above. But this morning, his hands felt clammy, and his breath came short as he looked up at the wide glass doors of Crestmark Bank on Fremont Avenue in Tempe, Arizona. He'd just turned 12, and this was his first solo deposit. The envelope in his hoodie pocket had exactly $220 inside. Birthday cash, 5s, 10s, a couple 20s, nothing crazy. But to him, it was the result of months of "you better save that" from Aunt Claudine, Uncle Leo, and his big cousin Ronell, who worked night shifts at the auto shop. His mom, Dr. Alicia Monroe, had driven him here but stayed in the car, giving him one last bit of advice through the rolled-down window. "You've got this, baby. Walk in there like you belong. Because you do." He nodded and tried to hide the shake in his knees. The sun beat down strong for mid-morning. His sneakers, still dusty from a pickup game the night before, squeaked a little on the floor as he stepped inside. The bank was quiet. Not empty, but quiet in that slow Saturday kind of way. A man in a button-down shirt stood at the kiosk checking his phone. An older couple sat in the waiting chairs, whispering about some paperwork. The line at the counter had just one woman in it. She was signing something, her toddler chewing on the edge of a deposit slip beside her. Tyrese took his place behind her and tried to breathe normal. He looked down at the envelope, double-checking his handwriting on the outside. T. Porter. Savings. He'd practiced his signature 3 times the night before, not because anyone asked him to, but because it felt like the right thing to do. He watched the digital cue board flick to the next number. The woman and her toddler left. The bank teller didn't even look up as she said, "Next." Tyrese stepped forward. "Hi," he said, polite and firm like his mum taught him. "I'm here to deposit into my savings." The teller raised her eyes, slow. Her name tag read Margaret Delaney. She looked maybe in her late 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair and a tight-lipped expression that didn't shift much. She didn't smile, didn't greet him back. Instead, her gaze dropped straight to the envelope in his hand. "And where'd you get that kind of money?" she asked. Tyrese blinked. He wasn't sure if he'd heard her right. "It's my birthday money," he said, lifting the envelope a little. "My aunt and my cousin gave it to me. I just wanted to put it in—" "Uh-huh," she said, cutting him off. She leaned forward over the counter, eyeing the bills like they were something suspicious. "Do you have a state-issued ID on you?" Tyrese hesitated. "No, Mom. Just my school ID and my account number. My mom opened it with me last summer." Margaret let out a slow breath through her nose. The kind adults do when they're already tired of dealing with you. She turned slightly to glance toward a nearby colleague, then back to Tyrese. "Well, I'm going to need to verify all of this," she said. "You could be anyone. And this could be anything." Tyrese's chest tightened. He looked down at the envelope again, as if it might have somehow changed since he walked in. But it was still just an envelope. Still his name. Still the money he'd been given. Fair and square. "I can give you the account number," he said. His voice was still calm, but softer now. Margaret didn't respond. Instead, she turned to pick up the phone next to her station. "I'm calling the manager to assist. Just wait." The man at the kiosk had now turned to look. The older couple whispered something, eyes shifting toward the boy at the counter. Tyrese felt his ears burn, and he tried not to look up. He reached into his backpack for the small blue bank booklet his mom had given him. Maybe that would help. But Margaret wasn't watching him anymore. She was talking to someone on the phone, glancing his way, lips tight. Tyrese swallowed hard. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. But the moment she hung up that phone, everything started to unravel faster than he could keep up. Margaret set the phone down with a soft click and gave Tyrese a pointed look, like she was sizing him up for something he hadn't signed up for. "Someone will be with you in a minute," she said curtly, then turned her attention to her computer screen, her fingers tapping as if he'd vanished from her view entirely. Tyrese stood there, unsure whether to say something or just wait. He glanced down at the envelope again. It wasn't shaking, but his hands felt stiff now, like they didn't quite belong to him. The lobby felt colder, not in temperature, just in mood. Like the energy shifted when she asked that first question. The man from the kiosk was still watching. So was one of the tellers a few windows down. No one said anything, but their eyes kept doing that thing, sliding away quickly whenever Tyrese looked up. A tall man in a dark grey tie came out from a hallway behind the counter. His name tag read, Kenneth Flores, branch manager. He approached slowly, not unfriendly, but with that cautious customer service face that never really showed what someone was thinking. "Hi there," Kenneth said. "You're trying to make a deposit?" Tyrese nodded. "Yes, sir. Into my savings account." "He says it's birthday money," Margaret chimed in from her desk without looking up. Kenneth gave her a brief glance, then turned back to Tyrese. "Do you have an account number on you?" Tyrese handed over the small blue booklet and the slip with his account info. Kenneth took it and began typing into a tablet. "I don't have a state ID," Tyrese added, voice smaller now. "Just school. I'm 12. Kenneth paused for half a second. 12, huh? And you came in by yourself?" "Yes, sir. My mom's outside." Kenneth nodded once. "Okay. Can I take a look at the money?" Tyrese handed over the envelope. Kenneth opened it carefully, like he was defusing a bomb, and began counting the bills right there at the counter. While he did, Margaret muttered, "I just thought we should be cautious. You never know these days." The words hit the air like a slap. Tyrese froze. He wasn't sure if he was supposed to say something. His stomach churned, but his feet stayed locked in place. It wasn't what she said, exactly. It was how she said it. Like he was a risk, a threat, a problem to be managed. Kenneth didn't respond to her. He finished counting, then looked at Tyrese. 220, correct? "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Okay. Give me a minute. I'll verify the account." As Kenneth stepped away, Tyrese stood quietly, the envelope gone from his hands now. His throat felt tight. He didn't want to cry. Not here, not in front of strangers. He tried to remember what his mom always said. "You're not the problem, baby. You are the reason someone else gets to grow today." But right now, it didn't feel like anyone was learning anything. A woman a few spots behind in line looked like she might say something. She opened her mouth, then just looked at her phone instead. When Kenneth came back, he handed Tyrese the slip confirming the account and deposit total. "You're all set," he said. "It's gone through." "Thank you," Tyrese whispered. But as he turned to leave, Margaret added under her breath, "Better safe than sorry." It wasn't loud, but loud enough. Tyrese stopped walking. His ears were hot again. He wanted to leave, but also wanted to say something, anything. Instead, he just turned back toward the exit, swallowing everything he couldn't express. But outside those doors, a pair of eyes had been watching, and they weren't about to stay silent any longer. The glass door opened slowly, and in walked a woman whose presence made the air shift without a word. Dr. Alicia Monroe didn't need to speak to be noticed. Her blazer was crisp, slate blue with subtle pinstripes, and her heels clacked across the polished floor with authority. Alicia was the kind of woman who moved like time belonged to her, not the other way around. Heads turned, some out of curiosity, others out of instinct. But she wasn't here for attention. She was here for her son. Tyrese saw her the moment she stepped in. His shoulders tensed, not out of fear, but something closer to relief. Like the moment you finally find the handle on a locked door. Margaret looked up. Her expression tightened, just for a second, as if she already knew. Alicia didn't approach the counter right away. She walked directly to her son, placed one hand gently on his back, and looked him straight in the eyes. "You okay?" she asked, low enough for only him to hear. Tyrese nodded, but not really. She didn't press. Instead, she turned to the counter, locking eyes with Margaret, then Kenneth, who had returned to the scene, sensing something had changed. "Good morning," Alicia said, her voice clear and even. "I'm Dr. Alicia Monroe. Tyrese is my son." Kenneth cleared his throat and offered a quick, formal smile. Yes, ma'am. Everything's taken care of. His deposit's been processed. That's not what I'm here to talk about, she replied. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But every word cut through the quiet. I watched my son walk in here on his own today, proud and ready to do something adults always say children should, be responsible. And instead of being guided, he was questioned, doubted, and humiliated. Margaret's face flushed. Ma'am, I was just following protocol. Your protocol doesn't include accusing a child of suspicious behavior because he came in with cash on his birthday. Kenneth stepped in quickly. Dr. Monroe, I assure you that wasn't our intention. Alicia turned slightly, her hands still calm at her sides. Do you know how many accounts my company holds with this bank, Mr. Flores? Kenneth shifted. I believe 3. Langford Innovations, your personal, and Monroe Education Group. Correct, she said. And I've personally trained over 300 young students in this city about financial literacy, most of them black and brown, most of them entering institutions where they're immediately sized up before being seen. So no, I'm not new to this conversation. A silence fell over the lobby. Even the toddler from earlier had gone quiet. Margaret opened her mouth to respond, but Alicia held up a hand, not to silence her, but to pause the moment. This isn't just about Tyrese, she continued. It's about every child who walks into a place like this and gets told, silently or directly, that they don't belong, that they need to prove something no one else is being asked to prove. Do you ask every child for state ID, or just mine? Margaret's voice dropped. That's not fair. It's not fair to put that pressure on a 12-year-old just because you assume something about him before he even says hello. Alicia stepped back and motioned toward her son. He walked in here doing exactly what we're told to teach our children. And instead of being seen for his effort, he was treated like a threat. The older couple in the waiting area exchanged glances. One of them gave a slow nod. Not everyone looked comfortable, but they looked awake. Tyrese watched his mom, wide-eyed, not just because of what she was saying, but because of how she said it. Steady, measured. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't asking for pity. She was telling the truth in front of people who had to sit in it. I'm not asking for an apology, Alicia said at last. I'm asking for awareness. But even as the weight of her words settled in, Tyrese hadn't said a thing, because something inside him still needed to finish what he started. For a moment, no one moved. Kenneth stood stiffly behind the counter, his hands clasped in front of him like a school principal mid-lecture. Margaret's eyes were down now, fixed on the laminated calendar near her keyboard. The branch had gone quiet, quieter than it had any right to be. But Tyrese wasn't paying attention to any of that. He was still looking at his mom. She hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. There was something about the way she carried herself, like every word she chose was a brick placed on purpose. He knew she was angry. He could feel it in the tension in her shoulders. But more than that, she was protective, steady, unshakable. It made him want to be the same. Tyrese, she said, turning slightly. Would you like to say anything? He hesitated. He hadn't expected her to ask. He thought she'd handle it like she always did, shielding him, fixing things so he wouldn't have to. But now, she was giving him a choice. He looked around at the grown-ups behind the counter, looked at the woman who had treated him like he didn't belong. Then he looked back at his mom, who was standing there like a wall between him and the part of the world that still didn't know how to treat him. He took a breath. I came in here to do what grown-ups told me I should do, he said. His voice cracked just a little, but he didn't stop. Save my money. Handle it myself. Be responsible. His hand tightened around the empty envelope still folded in his pocket. I didn't expect a celebration or anything, he continued. But I didn't expect to be treated like a problem. Margaret glanced up at him now. Her eyes weren't as hard as before. I had all my stuff, my account info, my school ID, and I was calm the whole time, even when I didn't understand why I was being treated different. He didn't say, because I'm black. He didn't need to. The room had already drawn that conclusion. I just wanted to put my money in the bank, Tyrese finished. That's all. He looked at Kenneth. I don't want anyone else to feel like that. Not in a place where people are supposed to help you. Kenneth nodded slowly. You're right. And I'm sorry you were made to feel that way. Alicia raised her chin slightly, listening. We should have done better, he added. Margaret, still quiet, finally spoke up. I misread the situation. I did. And I'm sorry, Tyrese. Her tone was less defensive now, not quite humbled, but closer to something real. Whether it came from guilt or realization, no one could be sure. But at least she said it. Alicia didn't reply right away. She turned to Tyrese again. You ready? She asked. He gave a tiny nod. Not yet. Kenneth looked confused. Was there something else we can do? Tyrese turned back toward the counter. Can I make the deposit again? There was a beat of silence. Alicia smiled. Just a little. Kenneth chuckled under his breath. Well, it's already been processed, but we can walk through it again. Symbolically, Tyrese stepped forward and pulled out the blue bank booklet. I want to do it myself, all the way. Kenneth took the booklet and grabbed a fresh deposit slip. Go ahead and fill this one out. Tyrese took the pen. Wrote slowly. Clearly. No shaking now. He handed it over and Kenneth stamped it, even though it wouldn't actually do anything. But in that moment, it wasn't about numbers in a system, it was about reclaiming something that should have never been taken. Margaret watched in silence as Tyrese picked up the slip, folded it into his booklet, and turned back toward his mom. All done, he said. Let's go, Alicia replied, but her eyes lingered just a second longer. On Margaret, then Kenneth, then the young man her son was quickly becoming. But outside, as they stepped into the sharp Arizona sunlight, something was still sitting heavy between them. Something that needed to be said before they drove away. The parking lot was half full, the kind of midday lull where heat shimmered above windshields and conversations drifted from open windows, but inside the Monroe sedan, it was still. Alicia closed the driver's side door gently. Tyrese buckled his seatbelt, then stared out the window for a few quiet seconds. The building looked different now, smaller, less intimidating. But the tightness in his chest hadn't fully left. Want to talk about it? She asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Then, why'd she look at me like that? Alicia didn't rush her answer. She leaned back in her seat and took a breath, like she'd answered this question before, but never quite like this. Because she made a decision about who you were before you said a word. That's not fair. No, she said. It's not. Tyrese looked down at the envelope again. Still empty, still folded perfectly. I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't, she said. But sometimes the world reacts to who it thinks you are, not who you actually are. Tyrese was quiet. Then, do you think she would have asked for all that if I was a white kid? Alicia's jaw tensed slightly. Not with anger, more like pain she'd learned to carry so well it didn't always show. No, she said. Probably not. They sat with that truth for a while. It didn't feel good. It wasn't supposed to, but it was honest. I didn't know what to say in there. Tyrese mumbled. I felt like if I got upset, it would just make it worse. Alicia turned toward him. You did exactly what you were supposed to. You stayed calm. You spoke up when you were ready. And you told the truth. Tyrese met her eyes. You weren't mad I didn't say anything at first. She shook her head. No. I was proud of you. I am proud of you. He nodded slowly. The tension in his shoulders started to fade a little. Alicia adjusted her seatbelt and looked straight ahead. This is why I push you. Why I expect so much. Not because you need to be perfect, but because sometimes that's what people expect just for you to be equal. I hate that. I know. Me too. A beat passed. I wanted her to feel embarrassed, Tyrese said. I wanted her to feel small. I get that, she said. But the goal isn't to shrink people down. It's to open their eyes. Let them carry what they've done, so they can choose to do better next time. But what if they don't? Then that's on them, not on you. Tyrese leaned his head back against the seat. She didn't say sorry until you showed up. Alicia looked at her son, her voice low. Sometimes people only act right when they realize the person they're looking down on has power. It's not right, but it happens. She should have treated me right from the start. Exactly. They sat in silence for a bit longer. A car pulled in 2 spots down, and a woman stepped out with a boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, holding a plastic coin bank in his hands. Alicia smiled faintly. See that? Someone else trying to teach their child how to handle money. Tyrese looked out the window. I hope he doesn't get treated like I did. I hope someone like you is there when he walks in. That made Tyrese smile for the first time all day. He looked at his mum again. Do you think I made a difference today? Alicia paused. I think you did something most people wouldn't have. You walked in there with pride. You walked out with your dignity. And along the way you forced people to look at themselves. He stared back at the building. Next time I go, I want to go alone again. Alicia grinned. Good. You should. But as she turned the key in the ignition, there was still one more thing Tyrese needed to understand. Something she'd been holding in since the moment he stepped inside that bank. The car hummed softly as Alicia turned the key, but she didn't pull out of the space right away. Her hand rested on the gear shift, fingers still for a moment. There's something I didn't tell you, she said, eyes forward. Tyrese looked over. About what? About that bank. About Margaret. He waited. I've been there before, she said. A few months ago. I was opening a secondary business account and she was the one who helped me. Tyrese blinked. Seriously? She wasn't rude, but she wasn't warm either. I remember thinking she was distant, like she had somewhere more important to be. I chalked it up to a bad day. He frowned. So you already knew how she was? Alicia nodded. I had a feeling, but I didn't expect you to be the one who'd get the worst of it. Tyrese looked out the window again, his jaw tight. You think she does that to other kids? I don't know, Alicia said. But I know what bias looks like when it hides behind a smile, or a lack of one. Tyrese leaned back into his seat. He wasn't mad at his mom, just mad at the weight of it all, at how complicated something so simple had become. I don't get it, he muttered. People always say to do the right thing. Save your money. Be polite. Show up early. And then this happens. Alicia looked over at him. That's because doing the right thing doesn't always mean you'll be treated right. But it does mean you're building something no one can take away. What's that? Character and memory. The kind that sticks with you so when someone else's kid goes through it, you'll know exactly what to do. He didn't speak for a second. Then, so, this isn't the last time this kind of thing will happen? Alicia shook her head slowly. Probably not. Tyrese exhaled hard through his nose. Great, she smiled gently. But next time, it won't hit the same. You'll be ready, and maybe the people around you will be better too, because you forced them to see something they didn't want to. He turned the envelope in his hands again, unfolding and folding it like origami. Then he said, I still want to do it for real. The deposit. You already did, she said, glancing at the booklet in his lap. No. I mean, go back another day. Walk in. Fill out the slip. Give it to someone who treats me right. Alicia's smile deepened. You want a redo. I want to end it right. He said it without hesitation. Alicia nodded slowly. We'll do that on your time. Tyrese sat up straighter now. And when I do, I'm not going to second-guess myself. I'll walk in like I belong. Because you do belong, she said. You always have. Don't let one moment make you shrink. He thought about that for a second. Then he opened the glove box, tucked the envelope inside, and closed it with finality. No point holding on to something empty. She raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yeah. I think I just made the most valuable deposit already. She laughed. Not loudly, but the kind that comes from the center of your chest. You really are your father's son, she said. Tyrese grinned. You say that when I'm being clever. I say that when you're being wise. They pulled out of the lot slowly, the bank growing smaller in the rear view. As the car turned onto the main road, Tyrese glanced down at the deposit booklet one last time before sliding it into his backpack. The numbers were there. But what mattered most wasn't on paper. It was what he'd gained without ever touching a dollar. But before the day ended, Tyrese had one last thing to say, and it was the kind of truth that doesn't come from a textbook or a lecture. They were halfway home when Tyrese spoke again. His voice was calm, but something in the way he said it made Alicia glance over. "You ever feel tired of having to prove something every time you walk in a room?" She didn't answer right away. The road ahead was flat and open, the Arizona sun casting sharp lines across the dashboard. She knew better than to give a quick response to a question like that. "All the time," she said. "More times than I can count." Tyrese looked down at his hands. "I didn't even do anything wrong, but it felt like I had to defend myself just to make a deposit." "You did," she said. "And that's what makes you dangerous. In the best way. Because you walked in there with truth and left with your pride. You didn't let them chip away at it." He was quiet for a while. Then, "I just don't want to be angry all the time." "You don't have to be," she replied. "Anger's not the goal. It's the warning light. What you do after that is what matters." Tyrese tilted his head. "So what do I do with it?" "You carry it the right way. Let it sharpen you, not harden you." He nodded, like he was still turning that over. Alicia pulled into a gas station, needing to grab a bottle of water before they finished the drive. As she stepped out of the car, she tossed her keys gently into Tyrese's lap. "Lock the doors if you need to. I won't be long." She disappeared into the store, and for the first time that day, Tyrese was alone again, this time with nothing but his thoughts. He looked down at the keys, then back at the parking lot. It wasn't about the bank anymore. It was about the way people saw him before he even got a chance to speak, about how his mom had fought battles he didn't even know existed until today, and about how, somehow, it was now his responsibility to walk a little taller, to carry a little more, even when it wasn't fair. The car door creaked as Alicia returned with a cold bottle of water. She handed it to him without a word, slid back into the driver's seat, and buckled up. Tyrese twisted the cap and took a sip. "You know," he said, setting the bottle down, "I think the hardest part wasn't her asking all those questions. It was the look on her face, like I didn't even deserve to be there." Alicia nodded slowly. "That's how they try to make you disappear," she said. "Not with words, with doubt, with silence, with that look." "But I didn't disappear," he said, voice stronger now. "No, you didn't." She reached over and gave his hand a quick squeeze. "And you won't. Not now. Not ever." They drove the rest of the way home without saying much, but it was the kind of quiet that felt full, not empty. As they pulled into the driveway, Tyrese leaned forward and looked at her. "Can I say one more thing?" Alicia smiled. "Always. I'm not just going to remember how they treated me," he said. "I'm going to remember how I responded." "That's the lesson," she said. "That's what makes you unstoppable." Tyrese opened the door, grabbed his backpack, and paused. "I think next time," he said, "I'll bring someone else with me, like Jordan or Micah. Teach them how to handle it too." Alicia's face lit up. "That's what leaders do," she said. Tyrese gave a small, confident nod. "Then I guess I'm a leader now." He stepped out into the sun. And this time, his footsteps didn't sound nervous or unsure. They sounded like someone who knew exactly where he was going. If this story moved you, even a little, don't just scroll past. Share it. Talk about it. Because every kid like Tyrese deserves to walk into the world with their head held high. And if you're still with us, hit subscribe. There's more to tell. A teacher humiliated him in front of the class. Then he opened his violin case and shattered every assumption in one haunting note. Cairo Thompson didn't need anyone to tell him he was different. He felt it the moment he stepped off the bus in front of West Ridge Middle School. The air in Boise, Idaho was dry and sharp that morning, and the sidewalk still glistened from an early sprinkler cycle. Students moved in tight clusters, eyes darting, laughs clipped, backs turned quickly as he passed. No one spoke to him. No one had to. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and kept walking. Cairo wasn't the kind of kid who tried to disappear, but he didn't try to stand out either. He watched more than he spoke, and when he did talk, it was in short, careful sentences. His mother always said, "Let the world reveal itself before you show all your cards. So that's what he did. He waited, observed, measured everything. Inside the main office, a woman with tight curls and a tired smile handed him his class schedule without looking up. "You're the transfer, right? From Pocatello?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Room 203. Miss Dell. English. Go straight there." No welcome, no introduction, just directions. And that was fine. Cairo didn't come here looking for attention. Room 203 smelled faintly like dust and pencil shavings. The desks were arranged in rows, the windows half covered with faded construction paper. Miss Dell looked up from her laptop when he walked in and squinted as if the sun had just hit her eyes. "You must be Cairo." "It's Cairo," he said softly. "Oh, right. Sorry. Grab any empty seat." He sat in the back, near the window, next to a kid who didn't look at him once. The class moved on like he wasn't there, and that suited Cairo just fine. But when lunch came around, things changed a little. He sat alone, eating the turkey sandwich his mum had made. He heard whispering 2 tables away, quiet snickers, a word or two he couldn't quite catch. Then someone called out, "Yo, new kid! You don't talk much, huh?" He looked up slowly. A boy in a baseball cap smirked at him, flanked by 2 others. "You got a name? Or you just go by transfer student?" Cairo stared at him for a second. "Cairo. What kind of name is that?" He paused. "It's mine." The boys chuckled, nudging each other like they'd won something. Cairo turned back to his sandwich. They wanted a reaction. He wasn't giving it to them. But they weren't the only ones watching. A girl sitting diagonally from him glanced up from her sketchpad. She didn't smile or speak, just held his gaze for a second longer than anyone else had all day. Then she looked away. By his 3rd class, the pattern was clear. He was being watched, not because of something he did, but because of what he was. The new kid. The quiet one. The outsider. A kid with dark skin in a sea of beige. He felt it in the hallways, in how teachers addressed him with a certain edge of formality, and how students laughed just a little louder when he passed by. Still, Cairo didn't flinch. Not yet. In music appreciation, things took a sharper turn. Mr. Renner was the kind of teacher who thought he was cooler than he was, always making jokes, calling students by nicknames they didn't ask for. He leaned against the whiteboard as he spoke about the greats, Mozart, Vivaldi, Chopin, and paused when he saw Cairo sitting silently in the corner. "You know anything about this stuff, Cairo?" he asked, pronouncing it wrong again. Cairo blinked slowly. "A little." "Oh yeah?" Renner chuckled. "What's your instrument? Drums? Bass?" There were a few snickers in the room. Cairo didn't respond. "Hey," Mr. Renner continued, smirking. "Maybe you should try the violin. That'd be something, huh?" The class broke into laughter, some loud, others quiet and unsure. But Cairo stayed still. Not a muscle moved. He stared at the teacher for a second too long. Then finally he said, "Okay." Renner tilted his head. "What?" "I'll play the violin." The room hushed, just for a moment. Then more chuckling followed, as if it had to. Cairo didn't care. He just repeated, more firmly, "I'll play." But no one in that room, not the teacher, not the students, knew that Cairo already had a violin at home, sitting quietly in its case, waiting. Cairo had walked home the same way he did every day, alone, backpack snug on his shoulders, head down, letting the rhythm of his footsteps distract him from the noise still echoing in his ears. He knew what the joke was supposed to mean. He knew how they said violin like it didn't belong to someone like him, and he knew that Mr. Renner hadn't expected him to say yes. But Cairo had never learned how to shrink. By the time he reached the apartment, his mom was already home. The scent of leftover gumbo filled the air, and the television was murmuring in the background. She looked up when he walked in. "Hey, baby," she said. "You good?" "Yeah," he said, kicking off his shoes. She didn't press. She never did. But she noticed the way he walked past the couch, straight into the hallway closet, the one she hadn't seen him open since they moved in 3 months ago. Inside was the case. Black, scratched, held together by a strip of electrical tape on one side. He lifted it like it was made of glass. He brought it to his room and sat on the edge of his bed. The zipper stuck halfway, like always, but he didn't force it. He knew its moods. Inside, the violin waited. The varnish was fading. The bridge had a tiny nick in it, barely noticeable. But the strings were intact. So was the soul of it. He ran his fingers over the wood, slow and careful. Then he pulled the bow from its sleeve, touched the hairs gently with his thumb. He remembered the last time he played, back in Pocatello, just a week before his uncle passed. His uncle had been more than just family. He was Cairo's mentor, his music teacher, the one who taught him that playing an instrument wasn't just about technique. "You're telling a story," he used to say. "And if you don't believe it, nobody else will." Cairo's fingers trembled a little as he tightened the bow. Then he set the violin under his chin, took a breath, and started to play. The notes came slow at first, crooked, soft. He hadn't touched the strings in months, but the muscle memory was still there, buried deep under the rust. He closed his eyes. Let the room fade. A few measures in, the music started to sound like him again. Not perfect, but honest. His mom appeared in the doorway, arms folded, leaning against the frame. "I knew you'd go looking for it," she said quietly. He stopped playing but didn't look up. "They said something," she added. "Didn't they?" He finally glanced at her. "It's nothing." She stepped inside, sat at the edge of the bed next to him. Her eyes went to the violin. "That's not nothing. That's your uncle's voice. You don't pick that up for nothing." Cairo exhaled through his nose. "They laughed when the teacher said I should try the violin. Like it was a joke," she frowned. "They still doing that?" He nodded. She didn't offer a speech. She just looked at him for a long moment, then give him something they can't laugh at. That night, he stayed up late. No distractions, no video games, just the music. He practiced until the pads of his fingers felt raw, played the scales, then the pieces his uncle had taught him, then the one that always made his mom cry. Schindler's List. He wasn't sure why he picked that one, but it always made something inside him settle, like the world got quiet just long enough for him to feel safe. By midnight, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, violin in his lap, staring at the ceiling. He wasn't nervous. Not yet. He just needed to make sure that when the moment came, he wouldn't miss. But the school wasn't ready for what was coming, and neither were the teachers who thought they had him figured out. Cairo didn't tell anyone else what he was planning, not his teachers, not the kids who sneered in the hallway, not even the girl from lunch with the sketchpad and the quiet eyes. This wasn't about showing off. It was about proving something, to himself, more than anyone. The next morning came too fast. He had barely slept. When his mom peeked in before work, he was already dressed, the violin case resting beside his backpack like it had always been there. "You sure about this?" she asked, tying her scarf. He nodded without looking up. "Yeah." She paused in the doorway. "Play it like you mean it." "I will." The bus ride was quiet. He held the case across his lap, one hand gripping the handle, the other tracing the frayed edges of the zipper. A boy across the aisle kept glancing at him, then down at the case, then back at him again. He didn't ask. He didn't have to. When Cairo walked through the school doors, something felt different. Not around him, inside him. Like something heavy had been moved, just a little. He got through English and history without much trouble. But the minutes crawled once lunch ended. Music class was 7th period. By the time the bell rang, his hands were damp. He walked slowly, violin case in hand, ignoring the looks he was getting. He could hear someone whisper as he passed, "Is he seriously bringing that thing?" He reached room 114 and stood outside for a second, just breathing. Then he pushed the door open and stepped inside. Mr. Renner was already by the piano, clicking through a presentation on romantic composers. "Take your seats," he said without looking up. Cairo didn't sit. He walked straight to the front of the room and placed the case on a side table. That caught Mr. Renner's attention. "Cairo, what's this?" he asked, brow furrowed. "I brought my violin." A few heads turned. A couple of kids snorted. One said under his breath, "No way he actually did it." Mr. Renner tilted his head, like he wasn't sure if this was some elaborate prank. Okay, that's bold. Want to show us something?" Cairo didn't answer. He unzipped the case, lifted the violin out slowly, adjusted the shoulder rest, and set it under his chin. His fingers found the strings like they had a mind of their own. The class wasn't laughing anymore. Some still wore smirks. Others looked confused. But the room was quieter now. Waiting. Cairo closed his eyes. He didn't start with warm-ups. He didn't fumble or adjust the bow 10 times like some kids did when they were stalling. He just started to play. The first note floated across the room. Soft, piercing, steady. Schindler's List wasn't a piece you played for applause. It was the kind of music that wrapped itself around a room and didn't let go. Every bend of the note, every pause, every trembling vibrato, it wasn't just sound. It was memory, loss, love, fear, grace. All the things Cairo couldn't say, pouring out through the strings. By the time he reached the second page, no one was shifting in their seats anymore. Even Mr. Renner had lowered his hand from the keyboard. Cairo didn't open his eyes once. He didn't see the way the girl with the sketchpad had stopped drawing, or how the boy in the back, the one who always cracked jokes, was staring like he was seeing something he didn't have a name for. When the final note fell into silence, it hung there like it didn't want to leave. Cairo lowered the violin, exhaled slowly, and looked around. No one said anything. No one clapped. No one moved. Not because they didn't care, because they didn't know how to respond. Mr. Renner swallowed. That was something else. Cairo gave a small nod and turned back to his seat. The room stayed silent for the rest of the period. But once class ended and the students poured into the hallway, the quiet gave way to whispers. And Cairo wasn't just the new kid anymore. The hallway after 7th period usually buzzed with energy, lockers slamming, voices rising, sneakers squeaking on tile. But that afternoon, something had shifted. Cairo felt it before he even left the classroom. He packed his violin carefully, not in a rush, just methodical like always. A few kids lingered near the door, talking in low voices. One of them glanced back at him, then looked away quickly. Outside, the voices followed him like shadows. "Did you hear that? Bro, I didn't even know he could play. That was wild. I almost cried, for real." He walked past them all like it didn't matter. But it did. Not because he wanted attention, because, for the first time, they were seeing him for something real. At his locker, he was putting away his books when someone tapped his shoulder. He turned. It was the girl with the sketchpad. She held it close to her chest like a secret. "Hey," she said. "Hey. You're really good," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Thanks. I mean, that wasn't just good. That was—" She hesitated. "I don't think I've ever heard anything like that before." Cairo gave a small smile. "I've been playing for a while." I could tell. They stood there for a second. Then she added, "I'm Ava. Cairo. I know." Then she left. No awkward silence, no giggles, no weird glances. Just a short moment. And it was enough. He turned back to his locker and found Mr. Renner standing a few feet down the hallway, arms crossed, watching him. "Cairo," the teacher called. "Got a second?" Cairo hesitated, then stepped over. Mr. Renner scratched the back of his neck. "Listen, about the other day. That comment I made in class. About the violin. It was out of line. I thought I was being funny." "I wasn't." Cairo said nothing. Renner sighed. "You made me eat my words today. In the best way. I should have asked instead of assuming. That's on me." There was a pause. Then Cairo said, "I didn't play to prove anything. I played because I needed to." Renner nodded slowly. "That's even better." As Cairo turned to go, Renner added, "You ever think about joining the school orchestra? I mean it. We could use someone like you. I'll think about it." That night, Cairo walked into the apartment and set the violin down gently in the corner of his room, like it had earned its rest. His mom was on the couch, watching a cooking show, but muted the volume as soon as he stepped in. "Well?" He shrugged, fighting the grin tugging at his mouth. "They heard me," she smiled. "That's all I needed to know." Dinner was quiet, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was nothing that needed explaining. She understood without words. Later, while doing homework at the kitchen table, Cairo's phone buzzed. A notification. Then another. Then 5 more. A clip had been posted to the school's group chat. Someone had recorded his performance. It was grainy and shaky, but the audio was clear enough to catch the emotion in every note. Underneath the video, the comments were piling up. "Wait, Cairo can play? Yo, this gave me chills. This hit different. Mr. Renner got humbled today, Lowell." Cairo stared at the screen for a long moment, then locked it and set it face down. The world could talk all it wanted. He had already said what he needed to say. But the attention didn't stop at the school chat, and the next day would bring a surprise that neither Cairo nor his mother saw coming. By the time Cairo got off the bus the next morning, his phone had already buzzed twice. Another message. Another share. Someone had uploaded the full video to TikTok overnight. A few hundred views, then a few thousand, then more. He hadn't even posted it himself. As he walked through the school entrance, he could feel it. Heads turned more slowly. Conversations paused mid-sentence. He wasn't invisible anymore, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind of attention. Not today. In the main hallway, a few kids nodded as he passed. One girl, who hadn't spoken a word to him before, leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's the violin kid." He wasn't sure how he felt about the title. It was better than the new kid, at least. During second period, the intercom crackled. "Cairo Thompson to the main office, please. Cairo Thompson." Whispers followed him down the aisle as he stood up and left. The walk to the office felt longer than usual. When he opened the door, the school secretary gave him a tight-lipped smile and nodded toward the principal's office. Principal O'Connor stood up when he walked in. A broad-shouldered woman in a navy blazer, she motioned to the chair across from her. "Cairo, have a seat." He sat, resting his hands in his lap. "I saw the video," she said, folding her arms. "Quite the performance." "Thank you." She studied him a second longer than necessary. "We don't usually allow students to bring instruments without checking first. But I'm glad you did." He said nothing. She leaned back. "You know, our spring arts showcase is coming up. I'd like you to perform. We've been trying to get more student participation, and I think you'd be a perfect addition." Cairo blinked. "You want me to play?" "I do. On stage, in front of everyone." He thought about it. About the kids who laughed. About the ones who watched him play like he was doing magic. And about Ava. Her eyes locked on his during the last note. "I'll do it." Principal O'Connor smiled. "I'll have the music department follow up with you. You can practice in the auditorium during free periods if you want." He stood up. "Thank you. Oh, and one more thing." She paused. "That piece you played, it stayed with me. Not many things do." That afternoon, he stayed late after school. The auditorium was empty except for a single janitor mopping near the exit. Cairo took a seat on the edge of the stage and pulled out his violin. The echoes here were different, larger, bolder. It wasn't like the classroom, where every note felt like a secret. Here, it felt like each one had a spotlight. He started slowly, testing the acoustics, adjusting the pressure of his bow. His fingers were stiff, more from nerves than anything else. But the music came anyway. Halfway through, he looked up and saw someone standing at the back of the room. It was Ava. She held her sketchpad like always, but this time, she didn't look away. When he stopped playing, she walked down the center aisle toward the stage. "I wasn't following you," she said before he could ask. "The secretary told me where you went." He smiled. "It's fine. You sound different in here." "Feels different." She hesitated. "Do you always play that piece?" "Not always," he said. "But it's the one that means the most to me." She looked down at her sketchpad, flipping it open. I drew this after you played yesterday. She handed it to him. It was a rough pencil sketch of him holding the violin, eyes closed, bow mid-air. There was something raw in the way she captured it. A kind of quiet strength. Cairo stared at it for a moment. Can I keep this? She nodded. I made it for you. But as Cairo took the drawing home that night, folded carefully between his textbooks, he knew the showcase wouldn't just be a performance. It would be a moment to face everything head-on, with no classroom to hide behind. The announcement went out on Friday. West Ridge Middle School's Spring Arts Showcase would be held the following Thursday evening. Posters were taped up in the hallways. The event was always low-key, mostly parents attending out of obligation. But this time, people were actually talking about it. Cairo wasn't used to being the reason for a buzz. He didn't want the attention. Not really. But now that it was here, he wasn't going to run from it either. He practiced every day after school. Ava showed up most afternoons, sitting cross-legged in the third row with her sketch pad open on her lap. She didn't say much. She just listened, and sometimes drew. Her presence kept him calm, like there was someone else who understood what the music meant without needing to explain it. 3 days before the showcase, Mr. Renner stepped into the auditorium during rehearsal. He stood by the exit at first, watching. Then, after a few minutes, he made his way to the stage. "You've got nerves of steel," he said. Cairo set the violin down. "I'm nervous. Could have fooled me. You play like you've done this 100 times. I kind of have." Cairo said. "Just never on a stage like this." Renner leaned against the piano. "You ever think about why that piece hits people the way it does?" Cairo thought for a second. "It sounds like memory, like someone remembering something painful, but beautiful." Renner looked at him with something closer to respect than Cairo had ever seen in his eyes before. "You're going to change the room when you play it." Cairo didn't answer. He just picked up the bow again and kept practicing. The day of the showcase arrived with a nervous kind of stillness. Cairo barely touched his breakfast. He spent most of the school day rehearsing in his head, fingers twitching slightly on his desk during math, tracing invisible notes. That evening, his mom helped him press his shirt and brush the dust off his shoes. "You sure you're ready?" she asked, standing in the doorway of his room as he zipped the violin case. "No," he said, grinning slightly. "But I'm doing it anyway." She pulled him into a hug. "Your uncle would have been proud of you, not because you're playing, but because you didn't let them stop you." They got to the school early. The auditorium was already half full, parents chatting in low voices, teachers in the back checking off names from a clipboard. Cairo peeked out from behind the curtain. Ava was there, sitting in the third row again, this time with her dad, who looked just as serious as she always did. Then he saw Mr. Renner talking to Principal O'Connor in the wings. When they noticed him looking, they both gave a nod. The lights dimmed. Cairo was third on the list. He didn't hear the first 2 acts, a dance routine and a vocal duet. He was too busy trying to keep his hands from shaking. Then his name was called. He stepped onto the stage, violin in hand, and walked to the center under the spotlight. He didn't look at the crowd, not yet. He took his position, bow raised, heart thudding like a drum line inside his chest. The first note came out soft, controlled. He didn't push. The room responded immediately. Silence. The kind of silence that meant people were listening with everything they had. He played slower than he had in rehearsal, letting the music breathe, letting the pauses stretch just enough to make them ache. He thought about his uncle, his mom, the hallway whispers, the comments, the way people looked at him that first week. He let it all come out through the strings. By the time he played the final note, his bow hand was trembling, but his grip never slipped. He opened his eyes. People were standing. Not everyone, but enough. Mr. Renner, Principal O'Connor, a few students from his class. Even Ava's dad had stood up, clapping with one hand over his chest. Cairo bowed quickly and left the stage. Backstage, his mom was waiting. Her eyes were red, but she was smiling. "You didn't play it," she whispered. "You lived it." But as the applause faded and Cairo packed his violin for the last time that night, he realized the real change hadn't happened on stage. It had started long before, the moment he chose not to stay silent. The following week felt like it belonged to someone else. People stopped him in the hallway. Teachers he didn't even know asked about his performance. A group of 8th graders in the lunchroom, usually the loudest and most sarcastic bunch in the school, actually clapped when he walked by. It was awkward, sure, but it was also kind of funny. Mr. Renner started calling him Maestro. Half joking but half proud. And even though Cairo didn't like nicknames, this one didn't sting. It didn't carry the same weight as before. One afternoon, Ava slid a folded paper across the lunch table toward him. He opened it slowly. It was a sketch of the stage, the spotlight. Him in profile, violin resting on his shoulder. In the crowd, she'd drawn outlines of faces, no detail, just shadows, all turned toward him. On the bottom, she'd written, "They saw you." Cairo looked up. "You made this. I watched the video like 5 times, she said. I wanted to remember how it felt. He tucked the drawing carefully into his binder. Thanks. I don't think people forget moments like that, she said. Even the ones who pretend they didn't notice. He didn't answer, but he thought about her words later, sitting at home with his violin back in its case. Thought about how moments don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper loud enough to change everything. The following Friday, Mr. Renner asked Cairo to speak to the younger music class. Just a short visit, nothing big. At first he wanted to say no, but something told him he should go. So he did. He stood in front of 20 or so 6th graders, all fidgeting in their seats, waiting for the kid from the video to say something brilliant. But Cairo just stood there, looking at their faces. Then he said, "When people expect nothing from you, they think silence is your place." The room went still. But silence can't teach them who you are. One of the students raised his hand. "How'd you get so good?" Cairo hesitated. A lot of practice. A lot of nights when it didn't sound right. And someone who believed in me even before I believed in myself. Another kid asked if he'd be famous one day. Cairo smiled. "I don't need to be famous. I just need to keep playing." After class, one of the younger students caught up to him in the hallway. "I'm going to ask my dad to get me a violin," the boy said. "I thought it was like boring before, but the way you played it, it was like talking without talking." Cairo thanked him, then kept walking. Back at home that night, he and his mum sat on the couch watching a movie neither of them cared about. The violin case was still out, resting against the wall. She glanced at it, then at him. "Ready for the next one?" she asked. He didn't even need to ask what she meant. "I think so," she smiled. "Good, because people are listening now, not just to the music, but to you." Cairo leaned back, head resting against the cushion. "I didn't think I'd ever be heard here." "You didn't wait for permission," she said. "You gave them no choice but to listen." He thought about that. Westridge hadn't changed overnight. Not every kid suddenly became kind. But something had shifted. The jokes stopped. The stares softened. And the weight on his chest, the one he didn't talk about, felt lighter now. The violin didn't solve everything, but it opened a door. And now no one could say he didn't belong. Because the truth is, sometimes respect doesn't come when you ask for it. It comes when you play the note no one expected, and you don't flinch when they finally hear it. If this story moved you even a little, take a second to subscribe. These are the stories that remind us who we are, and who we can be when we refuse to shrink. They dismissed him, they doubted him, and they made him feel small. But what they didn't know: his mother owned the very bank they tried to push him out of. 12-year-old Jaden Ellis stood at the entrance of Westbridge First National Bank, gripping a thick white envelope in his hands. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he felt excited. His mother, Monica Ellis, had finally let him handle something important on his own. It was a simple deposit, just some birthday money and allowance he had saved up, But to him, it felt like a step into responsibility, a small but meaningful moment. He adjusted his hoodie and walked in, the cool, air-conditioned space a sharp contrast to the warmth outside. The bank was sleek, all marble floors and glass partitions, the kind of place where people spoke in hushed tones. Business types in pressed suits stood at the counters. A few older couples filled out forms at a side table, and tellers in crisp uniforms moved with mechanical efficiency. Jaden took his place in line, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. The wait wasn't long. When it was his turn, he stepped up to the counter where a middle-aged woman with short blonde hair and thin-rimmed glasses sat behind the glass. Her name tag read, Margaret Downs. She barely glanced at him. "Next," she called, sounding bored. Jaden smiled politely and placed his envelope on the counter. "Hi, I want to deposit this into my account." Margaret's eyes flicked from the envelope to him. For the first time, she actually looked at him. Her expression shifted slightly, lips tightening, brows pulling together just enough to show she was already making an assumption. She didn't reach for the envelope. Instead, she leaned back slightly in her chair. "Where did you get this money?" Jaden blinked. My mom gave me the account to put it in." Margaret exhaled sharply through her nose. "That's not what I asked." There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long and makes the air feel heavier. Jaden shifted on his feet, thrown off by her tone. "My birthday and— Does your mother know you're here?" she cut in. "Or are you just walking in with cash?" The envelope still sat between them, untouched. Jaden's excitement had begun to fade. "Yes, she knows," he said, more cautious now. Margaret looked at him like she wasn't convinced. Instead of proceeding, she glanced over at a man standing near the offices in the back. Brandon Calloway. Senior banker. Suit pressed to perfection, wristwatch gleaming under the lights. He had been talking to another employee, but at Margaret's subtle signal, he looked over. Jaden saw the moment Calloway's gaze landed on him, the way his expression changed. Calloway walked over, his polished shoes making sharp clicks on the tile. "Is there a problem?" Margaret lifted her chin. "This young man says he wants to make a deposit." Calloway studied Jaden, then the envelope, and then Jaden again. There was something in his eyes. Not curiosity. Something else. He crossed his arms. "How much are we talking about here?" Jaden hesitated. About 500. A small, sharp breath from Margaret. Calloway's lips pressed together. "That's a lot of money for a kid," Calloway said. Jaden frowned. "It's my money." "Do you have ID?" Jaden shook his head. "No, but I have the account number." He pushed the envelope forward slightly, hoping that would be enough. Calloway didn't take it. "We don't handle unverified deposits from kids off the street," he said, voice calm but pointed. "Where's your parent or guardian?" Jaden felt heat rise in his chest. "I told you, my mom knows I'm here. She told me I could do this." But Margaret was already shaking her head. "I'm sorry, but we can't process this without verification." A few people in line were watching now. A man in a navy suit glanced over. A woman near the ape slowed her typing. Jaden felt small, like he wasn't supposed to be here. But before he could argue, the doors behind him swung open. The doors to Westbridge First National Bank swung open, letting in a rush of warm air from the street. Jaden didn't turn around. His focus was still on the two bank employees standing in front of him, blocking what should have been a simple transaction. Margaret tapped her fingers against the counter, her expression unreadable. Calloway, standing beside her, let out a quiet sigh, as if dealing with Jaden was a waste of his time. "You need an adult present," Calloway said again, slower this time, like Jaden wasn't understanding. Jaden felt the weight of every pair of eyes on him. The man in the suit near the counter, the older woman filling out a check. Even the security guard near the entrance had turned slightly, watching. "I have an account," Jaden said, trying to keep his voice steady. "My mom set it up for me." "That's not the issue," Margaret replied, giving him a look that made his stomach twist. "The issue is where this money came from." Jaden felt something in him snap. "I already told you. My birthday. And saving up. It's mine." Calloway exchanged a glance with Margaret. He adjusted his tie. Listen, kid. We have rules here. If we let anyone just walk in and dump cash into an account, you know how many problems that could cause. Jaden's fists clenched. But I'm not just anyone. I have the account number. Just check it. Margaret sighed, looking past Jaden toward the line forming behind him. She was losing patience, and now people were waiting. You're holding up business, she said flatly. Jaden felt heat creeping up his neck. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He wasn't trying to bother anyone. He just wanted to do what his mom had told him to do. Calloway motioned toward the security guard, a tall man with a badge that read D. Reynolds. He had been standing by the entrance, mostly indifferent, until now. Mr. Reynolds? Calloway called, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Would you mind helping this young man outside while he sorts this out with his parents? Jaden's stomach dropped. The security guard hesitated. He didn't seem thrilled about the request, but Calloway was a senior banker, and Reynolds didn't work for the customers. He worked for the bank. Jaden shook his head. You can't do that. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry, but we can't accept this transaction, Margaret said, pushing the envelope back toward him like it was something dirty. Jaden felt his face burn. The looks, the murmurs, the way Calloway and Margaret stood there, waiting for him to take the money and leave. And then, a voice cut through the tension. What exactly is going on here? It was strong, sharp, controlled, the type of voice that made people stop mid-sentence. Margaret's expression shifted instantly. Calloway's head snapped toward the entrance. The security guard, who had started moving toward Jaden, froze in place. Jaden turned. His mother stood there. Monica Ellis. She wasn't rushing, wasn't panicked. She was calm. Too calm. Dressed in a tailored navy blue suit, heels clicking lightly against the marble, she walked forward with the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. Jaden had never been so relieved to see her. Monica's eyes moved from Jaden to the envelope on the counter, then to the faces of the employees standing in front of him. Her expression was unreadable, but something about it made Margaret straighten in her chair and made Calloway shift slightly where he stood. Monica stopped beside her son and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. I asked a question, she said, looking directly at Calloway now. What's going on? Silence. Margaret opened her mouth, but Calloway spoke first. Mrs. Ellis, this young man was trying to deposit cash into an account, but we have certain policies. Monica tilted her head slightly. And what policy exactly says a child cannot deposit his own money into his own account? Margaret cleared her throat. Well, we have to verify where large sums of money come from, and Monica didn't blink. $500 is not a large sum of money? Calloway looked like he wanted to argue, but he hesitated. Monica turned to her son. Jaden, did you give them the account number? He nodded. Yes, but they wouldn't check it. Monica exhaled slowly, shaking her head. Then she turned back to Margaret. I assume you have access to the system? Margaret swallowed. Yes, but Monica didn't raise her voice, but somehow it still cut through the air like a knife. Then check. The account. Margaret hesitated for half a second too long. Then, reluctantly, she turned to her computer, her fingers moving stiffly over the keyboard. The entire bank was silent now, but things were far from over. Margaret's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her reluctance obvious. She had no choice now. With a sharp inhale, she started typing, her neatly trimmed nails clicking against the keys. Jaden stayed still, his mother's steady hand on his shoulder. He could feel the tension thick in the air. His mother wasn't yelling, wasn't making a scene, but somehow that made everything feel heavier. Calloway shifted, his lips pressing together as he stole a glance at the bank manager's office. His confidence from earlier had faded. Margaret cleared her throat, her voice suddenly quieter than before. What's the name on the account? Monica's eyes didn't waver. Jaden Ellis. Margaret typed it in, eyes scanning the screen. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. She squinted, like she didn't believe what she was seeing. Then, her posture stiffened. Calloway leaned over the counter slightly, trying to peek at the screen. What is it? Margaret's jaw clenched before she answered. The account is active. Jaden felt a rush of relief. See? I told you. Margaret said nothing. Calloway's fingers tapped impatiently against the counter. And the funds? Margaret hesitated. There's a substantial balance. Calloway's brows pulled together. Define substantial. Margaret swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. 7 figures. A single breath passed before the weight of her words sank in. $1 million account. Calloway's eyes widened. A hush rippled through the small crowd that had been watching. The man in the suit near the counter turned fully toward them now. The woman at the ATM had stopped pretending to type. Even the security guard shifted uncomfortably, like he wished he could be anywhere else. Jaden looked at his mother. He had no idea their account had that much money. He knew his mom was successful, but hearing it out loud like this... Margaret's lips parted slightly, like she was searching for a way to fix what she had just done. Calloway's face paled, but he wasn't ready to back down yet. Well, policies still require... Monica didn't let him finish. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said, her voice crisp. My son, whose name is on the account, provided you with the correct information and was refused service because... What, exactly? Margaret shrank slightly. We just needed to verify... Verify what? Monica cut in. That he belonged here. That the money was actually his. That he was worthy of being treated like a customer. Calloway exhaled sharply through his nose. Mrs. Ellis, we follow standard security measures for unaccompanied minors handling large transactions. Surely you understand the risk. Monica let out a short, humorless chuckle. Risk? She tilted her head. He wasn't withdrawing. He wasn't asking for a loan. He was depositing his own money. What exactly did you think he was going to do? Commit fraud? Launder $500? Margaret's cheeks flushed. She quickly looked away, as if hoping the screen in front of her could swallow her whole. Monica stepped closer, her voice controlled but sharp. The real risk here, Mr. Calloway, is that your bank just humiliated a child because you assumed he didn't belong. And now you're standing here scrambling for an excuse. Calloway's nostrils flared, his composure slipping. Mrs. Ellis, I assure you there was no ill intent. No. Monica's voice was almost too soft now. Then why was my son spoken to like a criminal? Why was security called? Calloway's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. He had no answer. Jaden's fingers tightened around the envelope. His chest still burned from the embarrassment, but now, watching his mother take control, he felt something else creeping in. Something close to vindication. Margaret let out a nervous breath. I can process the deposit now. Monica smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Don't bother. Margaret blinked. Excuse me? Monica reached into her handbag and pulled out a neatly folded document. Because as of this morning, she said, unfolding the papers with a practiced ease, this branch no longer belongs to Westbridge First National Bank. The blood drained from Margaret's face. Calloway's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Monica let the pause stretch long enough for the weight of her words to settle in. Then she finished, It belongs to me, and that's when the real fallout began. Silent, the kind that didn't just fill a room, it swallowed it whole. Margaret's fingers twitched near her keyboard, like she wanted to disappear behind the monitor. Calloway's jaw flexed, his once steady composure shattered. Even the security guard, who had been edging closer earlier, took a half-step back. Monica let the moment breathe, let them feel the weight of what just happened. She placed the official documents flat on the counter, tapping them lightly with one manicured nail. This morning, I finalized the acquisition of 4 Westbridge branches, including this one. Which means... She tilted her head slightly, eyes locking onto Calloway. I own this bank. Jaden exhaled, the tension in his chest shifting from humiliation to quiet satisfaction. He hadn't seen this coming, but the reaction on their faces made it all worth it. Margaret was the first to break. She scrambled to regain footing, her voice uneven. Mrs. Ellis, I had no idea. Monica raised a hand, silencing her with nothing more than a look. You didn't need to know. Her tone was smooth, measured. You just needed to do your job. But instead, you saw a boy, a black boy, and decided he couldn't possibly belong here. Margaret's face flushed. It wasn't about— Don't, Monica cut in, her voice sharper now. Don't insult me by pretending this was standard procedure. Calloway's lips pressed into a tight line. Mrs. Ellis, he started, trying to recover. I assure you, we hold all our customers to the same policies. Monica's eyebrow lifted. Do you? She glanced around, her gaze sweeping over the people still lingering, watching, witnessing. Tell me, Mr. Calloway, if a different 12-year-old had walked in, a boy in pressed khakis and boat shoes, or maybe a little girl in a sundress with her mother's pearls, would they have been grilled like this? Would they have been treated like a security threat? Calloway shifted his weight, but no words came out. Monica nodded slightly, as if she'd expected that. Then she turned to Margaret. And you, she said, her voice deceptively calm. How many children have you questioned like that? How many others have you humiliated at this counter? Margaret's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I'll tell you what's going to happen now, Monica continued, sliding the documents closer. There are going to be some changes in this branch. Calloway bristled. With all due respect, Mrs. Ellis, I've been with this institution for over 15 years. If you think you can just— Monica leaned forward slightly. I can, and I will. Calloway's jaw locked. For the first time, his carefully constructed authority had crumbled. Monica turned back to Margaret. You, take your lunch break. A long one. Margaret swallowed hard, glancing at Calloway like he might save her. But Calloway wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze was fixed on Monica, tension lacing his posture. And as for you— Monica turned to Calloway, her tone cooling even further. Clean out your desk. Calloway stiffened. You can't be serious. Monica's stare didn't waver. You escalated a situation that never needed to be a situation in the first place. You humiliated a child. You assumed. You judged. She inhaled slowly, then let out a sharp exhale. And now you're unemployed. Calloway's face darkened. He turned to the bank manager's office, where an older man in a navy suit had been standing silently, watching everything unfold. Mr. Lowe? Calloway called, searching for backup. But the bank manager, Richard Lowe, gave him nothing. Lowe was no fool. He wasn't about to challenge the woman who now owned the bank. Calloway let out a slow, shaky breath, his shoulders deflating. He didn't argue. He just nodded stiffly and turned toward his office, his movements robotic. Margaret, still frozen in place, took a step back. Should I? Take your break, Monica repeated, but there was no kindness in it. Margaret gave a quick, jerky nod and all but fled from behind the counter. The energy in the bank shifted instantly. The employees who had been silent started moving again, but slower, more careful. The customers who had been eavesdropping turned back to their business, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a reckoning. Jaden still hadn't moved. He was still holding the envelope, still standing there, absorbing it all. Monica finally turned back to him. The fire in her eyes softened. Go ahead, baby, she said gently. Deposit your money. A new teller, a younger man, nervous but professional, hurried over to the counter. I'll take care of that for you, he said quickly, his voice steady, despite the tension lingering in the air. Jaden stepped forward. He didn't look at Calloway, didn't look at Margaret. He just slid the envelope over and watched as the teller did his job. But this wasn't over yet. The teller, his name tag read Eric Vasquez, worked quickly, his fingers tapping over the keyboard. His hands weren't as steady as they should have been, but he wasn't about to make the same mistake as his co-workers. Jaden watched him count the money carefully, verify the deposit, and input the account details without hesitation. There was no questioning, no unnecessary scrutiny, just business being handled the way it should have been from the start. Your deposit is complete, Eric said, sliding the receipt across the counter with a forced but polite smile. Jaden took it. He wasn't sure if he should say thank you. It wasn't like they were doing him a favor. They were just doing what they should have done the moment he walked in. Monica took the receipt from his hand, glanced at it, and slipped it into her purse. Then, slowly, she turned back to face the room. Richard Lowe, the branch manager, stepped forward at last. He had been silent the entire time, watching from the sidelines, but now he cleared his throat, as if preparing to salvage the situation. "Mrs. Ellis," Lowe started, adjusting his suit jacket. "On behalf of the bank, I'd like to extend my sincerest apologies for this unfortunate incident." Monica didn't respond right away. She just gave him a slow, measured look, letting the discomfort stretch. "Unfortunate?" she repeated. "That's an interesting word choice." Lowe hesitated, the sweat already visible at his temple. I assure you, we take matters like this very seriously. This does not reflect the standards we uphold here at Westbridge." Monica let out a short laugh, shaking her head. "That's exactly the problem, Mr. Lowe." She gestured toward Calloway, who was still stiffly packing up his belongings, face unreadable. "Because it does reflect your standards. That's why no one stopped it. That's why the security guard was called instead of someone just checking the account." Lowe glanced at Calloway, then Margaret, who was still nowhere to be seen, and had the nerve to look embarrassed. "We can—" Lowe started, but Monica held up a hand. "Save it." She exhaled through her nose, steady and controlled. "I don't need lip service. What I need is for this bank to operate differently starting now." Lowe nodded quickly. "Of course. Here's what's going to happen," Monica continued, shifting the weight of her bag on her arm. "I'm bringing in an entirely new corporate oversight team to evaluate not just this branch, but every branch under my ownership. And I will be personally reviewing employee files, customer complaints, and—" She tilted her head, letting her gaze land on Calloway one last time. "Patterns." Calloway's shoulders tensed. He didn't say a word. He didn't dare. Lowe swallowed hard. "Understood." Monica turned toward Eric Vasquez, the only teller who had stepped in to help. "How long have you been here?" Eric straightened up. 6 months, Mom. You handled my son's transaction professionally." Eric blinked. I was just doing my job," Monica nodded. "That's exactly what's supposed to happen. And yet, here we are." Lowe cleared his throat again, desperate to regain control of the moment. "I assure you, we will work to make the necessary adjustments." "I'm not asking." Monica cut in smoothly. Lowe pressed his lips together, nodding stiffly. He understood. Jaden, still standing by his mother's side, watched everything unfold with quiet awe. He had seen his mother in business mode before, had heard her on calls, watched her run meetings, but never like this. Never where the subject was him. He felt taller, not just because his mum had shut them down, but because she had proved what he already knew deep down. He belonged here. Monica let the weight of her words settle before turning back to Jaden. "We're done here," she said, her voice calm but final. Jaden nodded, his grip tightening around the folded receipt in his hand. As they turned toward the exit, Monica glanced back one last time. "One more thing," she said, eyes locking on Lowe. "If I ever hear about something like this happening again, at any of my branches, Westbridge won't just have lost one senior banker." Lowe swallowed hard. "Understood, ma'am." She didn't wait for a response, and with that, she and Jaden walked out to the front doors. Jaden stepped outside, blinking against the late afternoon sun. The warmth felt different now, like something heavy had been lifted from his chest. He glanced up at his mother, expecting her to still be in business mode, but she was already softening. She pulled her sunglasses from her bag, slipping them on like nothing had happened. "Hungry?" she asked casually. Jaden hesitated. It was such a normal question after what had just happened. Yeah." Monica smiled. "Good. Let's get something before we head home." They walked toward her car, but Jaden's mind was still back in the bank. The way the teller had looked at him, the way Calloway had dismissed him, the way everyone had been so sure that a kid like him couldn't possibly have money to deposit. He should have been angry, and he was. But more than that, he felt seen. His mother had made sure of that. Jaden opened the passenger door, sliding in as Monica started the engine. As she pulled onto the street, he finally spoke. They didn't think I belonged there. Monica didn't react right away. She just kept driving, like she had been waiting for him to say it. No, she said finally. They didn't. Jaden frowned, his fingers running over the folded receipt in his pocket. I don't get it. It's just a bank. Monica sighed, tapping her fingers lightly against the steering wheel. It's never just a bank. Or just a school. Or just a store. People carry their assumptions with them. They don't even have to think about it. It's just there. And sometimes that means people like you have to prove you belong. Jaden stared out the window. That's not fair. Monica let out a dry chuckle. No, baby, it's not. They drove in silence for a moment before she glanced over at him. But here's the thing. You don't need anyone to validate you. You don't need permission to take up space. Jaden turned toward her. But they made me feel like I did. Monica nodded slowly. And they'll do it again. And again. That's why you never shrink yourself to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. Jaden sat with that. Monica gave him a sideways glance. You held yourself together in there. He shrugged. I didn't feel like it. That doesn't matter. You didn't yell. You didn't panic. You stood your ground, and you let them expose themselves. Jaden smirked slightly. You kinda did that part for me. Monica grinned. Oh, no doubt. But next time, you might have to handle it yourself. So you better be ready. Jaden leaned his head against the window, letting out a long breath. I still don't get how you owned the bank and didn't tell me. Monica laughed. Because it wasn't important. She paused. Until it was. Jaden let that sink in. They pulled into a small diner, one of those places with neon signs flickering in the window. Monica put the car in park and turned toward him. You're going to deal with people like that your whole life, she said. And when you do, you have two choices. You can let it define you, or you can remind them who you are. Jaden met her eyes. Like you did? Monica smiled. Exactly. He thought about that as they got out of the car, walking toward the entrance. For the first time that day, he felt taller. Judgment is easy. Assumptions are easier. But power comes from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let anyone take that from you. Always carry yourself with confidence, even when the world doubts you. And when someone questions your place in a room, make sure they remember your name when you leave. If this story resonated with you, share it. Let's start conversations that matter. And remember, your worth isn't up for debate.